Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to talk about sanding and tools that we can use for sanding and making the job a little easier. Okay, so in today's video, I'm going to talk about different sanders that you can purchase to make your job easier with sanding. And you notice that I have a lot of different types of sanding machines in my shop. And I guess, you're probably wondering why I have so many. Well, I do remember that when I had the cabinet shop, we had one sander, and it was basically this right here. And it was a Porter-Cable vibrating sander. And it was a powerhouse. It was a heavy-duty thing. You could really push down on that. The motor didn't bind at all. It just kept sanding, grinding away. It did a pretty good job for us. And at the time, large industrial belt sanders or drum sanders were extremely expensive. So we did all of our sanding using that particular thing, and I spent a lot of time sanding. Now in my shop, I still spend a lot of time sanding too, and I buy different equipment for the type of sanding that I need to do or certain things that I make. Now we all hate sanding, but sanding is what's going to allow you to get a beautiful finish on your project. So once you got it all, the fun part is cutting it all out, assembling it, seeing it come together. But then it comes to the part of finishing, and you really have to do a good job. And there's different techniques and different ways to make things look really nice in the end. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I just want to go over some of the tools that I have here and probably when you should probably purchase them or why you should purchase them. So I'm going to start out with the basics. That's just like these hand sanders right here. You can get these, $5, $6, $7 at the hardware store, and they just use a regular piece of sandpaper, and you slide it right in there, and it holds it, and it works quite well. And then I got ambitious one day, and I wanted to do some sliding dovetail joints, and so I made myself a bunch of different hand sanders to use in the shop. Now, I like to have different sanders for different grids of sandpaper. Like this one here has 220 on it, this one has 150, 180. So that way I can just load the sandpaper on there. I just pick up the sanding block and go to work, because I always start with a coarser grit and work to the finer. Now, you'll notice that I have a lot of these orbital sanders here. I actually have 4 of these, and this is a vibrating sander, or sometimes called a finishing sander. But if you're looking to upgrade from a hand sander, probably the first thing you're going to buy is one of these. Now, the vibrating sander or finish sander this one's a rather old one. I mean, this one's probably a good 25, maybe 30 years old. And this just takes a piece of 6-inch disc that sticks onto it, and it holds it pretty firm. It just vibrates. Now, the orbital sanders, they vibrate back and forth, but they also rotate as they work. And so they have actually a little belt that drives that rotation. So that's why you don't want to really push down too hard with these. Now you see that I have different ones. I actually recently just purchased this one, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But this one here is a variable speed. These two are not. And again, I like to have them so that, I have different grits on them. Now, one of the reasons that I purchased this new one is that it has a connection that makes it relatively simple to plug your vacuum into it, and it gives a nice solid connection. These I sort of have to makeshift connectors for my vacuum. Now I do have these little containers here and this little bag, and this one also has a dust bag here, but the dust bag really doesn't do that much for you. So it's kind of, I wanted something that could get rid of the dust, and this does an extremely good job. And I'll talk about that when I go over all of these sanders in another video. I'm going to do a video just on the orbiting sanders. This one, like I said, I think I said, it was a variable speed. And to be honest with you, I don't think you need to spend the extra money for variable speed. I mean, I've set this on 6, and it's not moved off there since. I understand the reason why you might want variable speed, but in all honesty, practically, you really don't use it. The other type of vibrating sander that I have is this one's called this one is actually a finish sander, and it's a triangle detail sander is another word for it. And this is a relatively cheap one. I think this one I got from Harbor Freight. I've probably used this 2 or 3 times. It's nice for getting small areas into small areas and stuff, but if you're hitting up into the corners, it does damage the corners from the vibration on this. So, you know, I don't know that I would ever buy another one of these. I'm glad I bought a cheap one. Like I said, I just don't use that much. I would get something like this if you just wanted a finishing sander. They also come square, so they use, you can make 4 cuts off a regular piece of sanding sheet for the square ones, and I'll throw a picture up here. I don't own one of those, but they do work exactly the same as this one. And this is for when you get down to the finished part of it, and you don't want the orbiting sanders to make those swirly marks in your woodworking. And there are ways of getting rid of that. Again, I'll talk about that later on. Now this belt sander here is it's a Craftsman, it's an old Craftsman, and that is probably 35 years, I would say, if not a lot older. It works great, still works great. I just used it the other day, but you want a belt sander. Now these you can use on just about everything. These will do a finish sand, and you know, it also bring down stock rather quickly if you have 80 grit on. So I generally have it as 80, 120, 180, and then this one's going to be, you know, whatever I need for vacuuming off stuff. And I'll probably end up buying more of these and eventually selling these so that I could have all of them to have a vacuum connect on it, an easy vacuum connect on it. But belt sander, you really want a belt sander for removing large quantities of wood off your piece and flattening out stuff. So if you do butcher blocks, if you do a lot of tabletops, you definitely want a belt sander. Now, like I said, this one's an old one. This one has worked perfect. I've never had a reason to upgrade or get a bigger one. But I think if I were to go buy one, at the beginning, I would recommend that you would buy a 4-inch wide. This one's a 3-inch wide. A 4-inch wide gives you a little bit more. It is a little bit heavier. They are kind of a heavy beast. I mean, when you use them for a while, they do wear on your arms. So you got to be careful. You got to control them, and they do want to grab and take off. Now, these are, you know, what you're probably going to start out with when you first start doing cabinet making, and then eventually you're going to want to buy some type of larger sander. Now, I have 3 types here. I have the drum sander, which is this really big investment. And then we have I think it's called let's see, I got it written down, oscillating edge and spindle sander is the official name of that one down there, the rigid one. And that's really a nice one. Oscillating sander means that it just moves up and down as it's rotating around. So you get different parts of the sanding belt or the drum, and it doesn't burn. And then this one here is just a disc and belt sander, industrial type, and this is really good. I mean, I use this all the time. So when should you buy these? Well, let's talk about each one. This one you'd probably want to get here when you're doing a lot of small parts that you need to sand down rather quickly. The disc sander is nice and level. You can square something up against it. The belt sander removes a lot. So if you're doing small boxes, if you're doing like I use it for wood turning. I use that a lot of times to cut, you know, to sand down those pieces to get them into the right dimensions or the right shape. So it works rather fast, and it's kind of nice. So I think if I was starting out between these two, I would go with the rigid oscillating spindle sander there, because it does have a belt sander that goes on like this one. You can do edges on things, and especially if you're doing any type of round work, like if you're doing scroll saw type work or bandsaw type work where you have a curve, or you're doing a lot of things with a curve, you definitely want to have the spindle sander. And that one is just a nice combination sander to get. And then maybe later on, you know, purchase this particular one if you feel the need. Then I think the last one that you're going to end up wanting to have is the drum sander. And this drum sander is excellent for getting wood down to the proper thickness, sanding everything smooth before assembly, flattening butcher blocks, flattening anything, working on face frames, getting them all flattened out. I would say that, you know, this is probably one of the best additions to my shop as far as making my production value in my shop go up much quicker and getting things done. Again, you know, starting out, you're going to start with a hand sander. Then I would get, you know, an orbital sander. I think one of these. And again, don't waste the money on the variable speed. I don't think that you really ever use it or ever miss not having it. Then I would go with something like the rigid oscillating orbital spindle sander. A lot of words in that. Before I would go with just the disc and belt sander. Bench disc and belt sander. And then eventually you're going to want one of these. This is once you start building any type of cabinet work, anything like that, that's the thing to have right there. That saves you a ton of time. And then all of these can be used and finished. So hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. I thank all of you who stayed this long. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments or think that there's a sander that I missed that I should have talked about, leave it in the comments. Love to hear from you. I will be doing some more videos just like this, so hopefully you'll be around for them. Thanks for watching.